Hey everyone, welcome back to your ASMR bedtime stories. Tonight, we dive into a spine-tingling carnival of shadows with our brand new series, 13 ASMR Evil Clown Horror Stories. These are creepy bedtime tales crafted to ease you into sleep with hushed giggles of the damned and the flickering red nose of the trickster's grin. We'll unravel 13 twisted fates, each one a muffled cackle from the clown's curse, lurking in the forgotten big tops and foggy midways of America. So dim the lights, slip on those headphones, and let these scary ASMR stories usher you into the Blood Street sawdust of folklore's nightmare circus. Without further ado, let's kick off our parade into the world of the eternal grin. Out on the edge of town, there was this rusted-out skeleton of a circus, from the 70-seconds tattered tents flapping like dead skin, and splintered bleachers that looked ready to collapse. That's where some kid acrobat had bought it, hanging from the trapeze in one hell of a bad flip. On Halloween night, 14 Sarah, Mike, Lena, and that wise-ass Jax busted in for some dumb viral challenge, phones out recording every damn step. This is straight TikTok gold, yo. Jax yelled, striking a pose on the frozen carousel. Those wooden horses staring with painted eyes that swore they were tracking him. October fog coiled around like snakes, but they blew off the sweet, musty stink rising from the sawdust. They poked around the big top, splashing through puddles that reeked like burnt cotton candy. Jack tripped over some loose wire, cracking up as he hauled himself up, but Sarah got this sudden chill like the shadows were inching in closer. Dead center on the stage, they unrolled this old-ass poster, "The show never ends." They busted out nervous laughs, spreading it wide to reveal grainy pics from the final gig. The kid, limp as a rag doll, neck snapped at a wrong angle, and a blurry crowd that looked like they were clapping without a sound. Mike cracked a ghost joke to play it cool, but Lena spotted it in the shots. A clown lurking in the back, all fuzzy, staring right at the lens, like he knew some punk would dig this up years later. They shook it off, blaming dust and the fading light. As night dropped, the wind howled like a starving crowd, dragging in faint calliope tunes from God knows where. The circus lights no one remembered flipping them on flickered with an electric buzz, washing everything in this sickly red glow. Sarah shivered hard when she heard the first creak, a steady swing up top like the trapeze wouldn't stay still for shit. They craned their necks, spines popping. Up there on the rusty bar, a shape dangled, a clown in a faded getup, makeup cracked like dead flesh, floppy shoes hanging limp. He nailed the kid's moves to a T, graceful leap, mid-air spin, then the drop. Neck cracked like a gunshot on the wet dirt, but the clown popped back up, laughing without a peep, that red grin stretching way past his cheeks, like the smash was just another gag. It's gotta be a hologram, some kind of prank, Mike stammered, but his voice cracked when the clown whipped around, empty eyes glowing like busted bulbs. Jax bolted first, snagging on invisible wires that shot up from the ground like live roots, hollering as his flashlight tumbled and threw shadows dancing like puppets on strings. Lena felt a gloved hand brush her shoulder, stinking of stale cotton candy and wet dirt, and she spun to see white mitts poking out of the fog. Sarah kept filming, heart pounding like a circus drum in her ears, till the foam caught the clown right on her tail, copying her freaked out stance. His mug slapped over hers on the screen. They tried booking it together, but the big top felt bigger now, tent flaps closing like jaws. Jax vanished down a side aisle, his screen cut off by a choked giggle. Mike ate shit in a puddle that turned red under him. Lena and Sarah huddled behind a bleacher, gasping for air, but the clown swung back up top, looping the routine. Leap, spin, crash. Each thud shook the floor, and with every one, he got smoother, more alive. Nobody made it out that night. Come dawn, the place looked untouched, like they'd never crashed the party. Phones scattered in the dirt, looping that last vid. 4 kids strolling in the main gate, cracking up easy. But at the end, the clown tailing him step for step, gates slamming shut with a final click. The show's endless, man, and now they were stuck in the cast forever. In every single kid's party photo Elena checked, there was this uninvited clown, a red and white blur in the background, getting closer in every shot. As a freelance photographer, the first time she saw it, she just photoshopped it out, figuring it was some weird lens flare. But the face just regenerated, pixel by pixel, smiling wider. Now, at Timmy's birthday bash, the clown was barely 10 feet from the gift table, blowing up a balloon with a mouth that stretched his makeup practically to his ears. Elena snapped her camera's focus through the suburban backyard chaos, pink balloons, shrieking kids, and the October sun filtering through the fallen leaves like bloody confetti. The kids were buzzing around the piñata, their sharp laughs cutting the air, while the moms sipped rosé from plastic cups, gabbing about schools and diets. It all seemed totally normal, a weekly gig Elena knew cold. Flashes, awkward poses, smiles captured in a JPEG. Until the shutter went off and snagged the moment. The clown, a white glove brushing Timmy's shoulder. The kid turned around, looking confused, like he just felt a sudden chill. He hadn't been hired. Elena knew it because she'd personally booked the skinny magician across the yard, who was currently botching card tricks and sweating through his cheesy cape. "Who the heck are you?" Elena whispered, closing in with the camera ready, the zoom buzzing like an angry hornet. The clown didn't answer. He just slowly turned his head, his button black eyes locked on the lens, and for a split second, Elena swore she saw her own reflection in them, warped into a nasty red grin. Click. On the camera screen, he was closer, his shadow stretching over the piñata like a blob of ink. Elena backed up, her stomach churning, pretending to adjust her camera strap as the clown just melted into the crowd, vanishing behind a group of clueless, laughing parents. She finished the job with shaky hands, handing off the digital proofs to Timmy's mom, who raved about the perfect light. But back at home, that rainy October night, with the drops drumming on the window, she opened her editing software under the cold glare of her desk lamp. The clown was multiplied now, showing up in every photo in the series, lurking behind the piñata with a balloon knife, whispering into a little girl's ear whose expression was now blank, even posing with the parents like some old buddy nobody remembered inviting. She tried to delete him again, dragging the cursor over that painted face, her heart pounding like she was trying to erase a crime. but the file corrupted with a sharp beep. The clown just regenerated, pixel by pixel, creeping into other pictures in her library. Grainy shots of her own childhood party she'd forgotten. Her canceled wedding where the groom's smile looked just as fake. Her cat that died last year curled up in a box, with the clown now crouched in the background, inflating a black heart-shaped balloon. Freaking out, Elena took one last photo at midnight, facing her bathroom mirror fogged up from a hot shower that hadn't calmed her down. The flash lit up her pale face, with dark circles dug deep, like grooves in clay. And there, in the reflection, right behind her, the clown was grinning with teeth that looked razor sharp. But he wasn't the one terrifying her now. It was her own mouth, forcibly stitched up with thick red thread, curved into an endless smile that pulled her skin tight, making tears of pain mix with a laugh she couldn't stop. Click. The camera crashed to the floor with a crunch, and the clown finally laughed, a low guttural sound that came out of her own throat like it had been waiting there all along, just for the final click. "There's a clown in the basement," little Tommy kept saying every night, curled up under the covers, his eyes wide as saucers, reflecting the moonlight sneaking through the shabby curtains. His parents just blew him off in their new Elm Street place, a Victorian beast of a house with high ceilings and secrets tucked into the cracks. They chalked it up to an overactive imagination fueled by cartoons and the stress of moving. "It's just the wind, buddy," his mom would say, kissing his forehead before flicking off the light, while his dad snored next door, wiped out from double shifts at the factory. Then the dad went downstairs one torrential afternoon to grab some tools. Water was dripping from the ceiling like black tears. The air in the basement was thick, smelling of something sweet and sharp like cotton candy left out in the sun too long, mixed with a metallic tang like rusty pennies. He stepped through puddles that shimmered with the unsteady beam of his flashlight, and in a dusty storage closet, behind shelves of dented cans and cobwebs thick as rope, he found an old clown suit. It was faded red with patchy white polka dots, the pom-poms tattered like open wounds, and covered in dark stains that looked like rust or dried blood that never quite came out. "Check this out, huh? Probably from the old owner's some party maniac," the dad said when he came up, hanging it on the coat rack by the front door like a morbid joke, dusting off his sleeves. Tommy saw it from the hallway and went white, backing right up against the wall, his tiny fingers digging into the doorframe. "That's him, the one from the basement," he stammered, but his mom, exhausted from a house full of unpacked boxes, just gently scolded him. "No more stories before bed, Tommy. You have school tomorrow." Tommy couldn't sleep. The mattress sagged uncomfortably under his small weight. That night, the house groaned as the fall wind whipped branches against the windows like scratching claws. His parents crashed early, the exhaustion heavy as lead. But underneath the floor, something was moving. A soft scribe, like rubber shoes rubbing on rough cement, followed by muffled, gurgling laughter like someone laughing with a mouthful of dirty water or wet confetti. The sound came up in waves, first distant, then closer, until Tommy swore he could feel it vibrating in the floorboards. "Dad, he's laughing down there," he yelled, jumping out of bed, but his dad just mumbled, "Wind, go to sleep," from the next room, rolling over with a sigh. At dawn, with the sun filtering grayly through heavy clouds, the mother finally gave in to Tommy's persistent crying, and opened the basement trapdoor, her flashlight beam shaking, cutting the darkness like a dull knife. The basement wasn't the same utilitarian square they expected. It stretched out past the home's foundation, a maze of damp, curving tunnels that smelled like a rotting circus, stale popcorn, crowd sweat, and that cloying sweetness that was now suffocating. Echoes of calliope music drifted in the stagnant air, a distorted melody repeating on a loop like a scratched record. In the center of what should have been the main room, the clown suit hung alone on the makeshift rack, inflated as if someone was wearing it from the inside, the dark stains now oozing a thick, slimy liquid that splattered the floor in reflective puddles. And from the long shadows, two white eyes glowed like headlights in the fog. The clown, real and bony, its painted face cracked like old porcelain, its permanent grin never blinking. It reached out a gloved hand, and the air filled with a whisper. "Play with me, Tommy." They carried Tommy back upstairs that night, dragging him up the steps while he kicked and laughed hysterically, but it was too late. The boy was smiling in his sleep, whispering dirty jokes nobody understood, words that sounded like echoes of long-forgotten shows. The next day, they found the basement normal again, empty closet, the smell gone like a bad dream. But Tommy wouldn't go upstairs anymore, on his own. He played downstairs for hours, crawling around in the dark with his new invisible friend, and the muffled laughter now bled from his bedroom, seeping through the ceiling cracks like an invitation. The house had chosen all of them, and the basement waited, patient, for the next family to ignore the scratching. Carlos, the graveyard shift delivery guy, heard the first laugh, high-pitched, like a kid on a rusty swing set, echoing from the dark alley where shadows piled up like forgotten trash. It was 11:58 p.m. on a dead quiet street in October. The urban legend haunted him like a bad joke. 13 distinct laughs at midnight. And the laughing clown has marked you for good. But he was a 32-year-old skeptic, with bills stacked like evidence on the dash of his beat-up van, and a fresh divorce still burning in his chest. "Tourist crap for Halloween," he muttered, adjusting the rearview mirror fogged by his breath, the engine idling like a sick cat. The orange glow of the streetlights wrapped the interstate, painting the asphalt with a spooky sheen, but Carlos hit the gas when the second laugh exploded, guttural, like some drunk guy in a far-off bar, with an echo that seemed to drag itself along the pavement. He yanked his cell phone from his worn jacket pocket and hit the voice recorder, more out of morbid curiosity than actual fear, counting silently as the laughs multiplied in the sticky night. The third was a muffled clucking, like water gurgling down a drain. The fourth, an asthmatic wheeze that raised the hairs on his neck, reminding him of his grandpa's coughs in the hospital. He counted under his breath, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill creeping in through the cracked windows. The fifth was hysterical, contained like a disguised sob. The sixth, bubbly, like soda spilled on a dirty floor. The seventh, dry like bones rattling in a sack. The dashboard clock hit 12:01, but he kept going, mesmerized. The eighth, a sharp shriek that vibrated the glass. The ninth, a rough whisper like wind through empty cans. The 10th made him slam the brakes, tires squealing, a deep, malicious laugh that felt like it came from his own chest. He shook his head, laughing nervously to chase it off, But the 11th and 12th came together, a sinister twin duo, one sharp and piercing, the other low and booming, that made his van feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. The clock hit exactly midnight, and the 13th thundered, deep, malicious, with an echo that vibrated his ribs like an internal punch. Carlos floored the accelerator, the engine howling in protest, but the laughter followed him all the way to his dumpy third-floor apartment in a building that smelled like mildew and reheated food, seeping through the door cracks like invisible smoke. He collapsed on the frayed sofa, the phone still warm in his hand, and waited for dawn to replay the recording under the harsh midday light that sliced through broken blinds. One by one, the laughs played out from the cracked speaker, familiar in their weirdness, each one a punch to the gut that left him gasping. But when it got to the 13th, it was his own voice, warped into a cackle he didn't ever remember making, echoing in an infinite loop that seemed to mock his disbelief. "What the hell?" he muttered, rewinding it again and again, his finger trembling on the screen. He hadn't died yet. That was the worst part. The clown didn't kill you right away. It made you laugh, until the world became a cruel joke, until your own voice betrayed you. That night, alone in the gloom with a lukewarm beer, Carlos heard the first laugh again in his bathroom mirror, his own, coming from a painted mouth that wasn't his. Red lips stretched into a grin that looked back at him. He counted 11 more before sunrise, each one closer, more his own, until the 13th burst from his throat without permission, a sound that buckled his knees. He turned off the light, but the recording kept playing in his head, and on the street below, a distant car horn sounded like the beginning of applause. The clown had his number, and the show was just getting started. Every 13 years, a kid vanished from the Willow Creek Fair, a rural town where the fall painted the fields withered gold, and the air was thick with smoke from distant bonfires, went off with the circus. The adults would say, eyes shifting, blaming negligent parents or the fickle October wind, while swapping stories at the local diner under fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying bugs. This October 13th, reporter Alex Rivera rolled into town with a crumpled notepad and skepticism sharp as the pen in his pocket, drawn by the rumors circulating in the town bar like forbidden cigarette smoke. He interviewed the old mayor's widow on her creaking porch, surrounded by dry potted plants and a swing set groaning in the breeze. She sipped lukewarm tea from a chipped mug, her shaky hands marked by decades of working the land. "The circus never leaves, young man," she whispered, her voice a thread broken by the wind. "It just hides underground, waiting for the cycle." She handed him a map scribbled on a coffee-stained napkin, crooked lines pointing to the Central Park, where the fair set up every fall with squeaky carousels and sticky cotton candy. At dusk, with the sun sinking into a bruised purple sky, Alex dug into the Central Park ground, his shovel biting into the damp earth that smelled of rotten roots and buried secrets. The first hit sounded hollow, rotten wood under the grass, and soon the trailers emerged like giant, exhumed coffins with peeling paint that still read "The Circus of Whispers" in faded letters. He shoved open the door of the first one, hinges screaming like lost souls, and the inside hit him with a stench of mold and old makeup. Yellowed posters lined the walls. Clowns with smiles that didn't reach their sunken eyes. Ads for eternal shows. On a wobbly table lay a dusty ledger. Names of kids. Dates every 13 years since the 52nds. All marked with a scribbled red L. Laugh. As if it were a harvest. The full moon turned the leaves silver, and then the whispers started. Children's voices, choked by forced giggles that rose from the ground like twisting, live roots, climbing up his muddy boots. Alex felt a tingling on the back of his neck, like invisible fingers tracing his spine, and he bolted to the makeshift big top in the middle of the park, where the townsfolk pretended ignorance, crunching on caramel apples and tossing balls at carnival booths, their laughter a little too loud, a little too practiced. The head clown emerged from the center stage, like a solidified nightmare, tall and gaunt, with a white and red striped suit that undulated like living tentacles under the flickering string lights. He wasn't human. His skin was a tight, translucent membrane, veins pulsing with an eternal hunger beneath the surface, eyes like bottomless pits that sucked in the light. He leaned toward Alex, his breath smelling of popped balloons and stale candy, and held out a gloved hand stained with dry confetti. Alex confronted him with his recorder on, the red light blinking like an accusing eye. "Why the kids? What the hell are you?" he shouted, his voice cracking in the thick air. The clown leaned closer, his grin stretching until the makeup cracked. Because their laugh is pure. Until you force it, until it breaks, like glass. He reached out his hand again, and Alex felt a tickle in his throat, a laugh rising like sour bile, forced and alien, making his lungs burn. He ran then, tripping over roots he didn't remember seeing, the notepad falling from his pocket into the wet dirt. But the circus followed him, whispers on the wind, licking at his ears. Shadows of trailers stretching on the trees like accusing fingers. At dawn, Willow Creek woke up wrapped in fog, with no trace of the out-of-town reporter. Just a new sign tacked onto the fair post. The show goes on, reserved seating. In the town library basement, an updated ledger lay open to a fresh page. Alex Rivera, marked with a red L that still looked like it was dripping. At age 10, Javier tore through Stephen King's It in one furious thunderstorm night, the yellowed pages crackling like dry bones under the flickering beam of a flashlight. Pennywise, the dancing clown from the drain, snuck into his dreams that same week. Orange eyes glowing from the family bathroom sink. Red balloons floating aimlessly in the dark hall, whispering promises of eternal playtime. But it wasn't Pennywise visiting him in the sweaty pre-dawn hours. It was something older, a primordial hungry whisper that only used the clown's form because Javier feared that above all else, childhood innocence twisted into sharp claws, joy turned to venom. Now, at 32, Javier was a literature professor at a gray, bureaucratic university, married to a practical woman named Marta, who dismissed his night terrors with a sigh and an extra melatonin pill. The suburban house they shared was a refuge of routines. Microwave dinners, stacks of ungraded papers, and the basement drain that dripped with a hypnotic rhythm, like a clock counting down to the next awakening. Javier avoided it, blaming old pipes, but the sound drew him in on sleepless nights, a low clucking that echoed in his skull like the remnants of old laughter. One Halloween night, with the neighborhood lit by carved pumpkins that flickered like malicious eyes, Javier was grading papers by the shaky light of a candle in the basement, the air heavy with humidity and the smell of mildew that clung to the skin. He heard the laugh then, bubbly and muffled, like water being stirred in a deep well. He dropped the stack of papers with cold hands, a trembling flashlight in the other, the beam cutting the darkness to the central drain, where the stagnant water reflected his haggard face. And there it was, not the dairy clown with his silvery suit and bright pom-poms, but a faded, ancient version, makeup peeling like sunburned skin, sunken eyes looking at him with a lazy, eternal curiosity. "You've grown up, Javier," the thing hissed, its voice an echo of 1,000 static radio channels mixed with distant cackles. "Your fear has matured like sour wine. You no longer serve red balloons. Now, you deny what lurks at the edges of your adult life." Javier backed up, the flashlight falling and rolling, casting shadows that danced like accomplices. He remembered the therapy sessions of his adolescence, the pills that drowned the imaginary monsters in a sea of drowsiness. The nights he woke up screaming, only to find his mother watching over him with tired eyes. But the clown had changed form that night, its suit rippling like living cloth until it became a wrinkled gray business suit, a red tie oozing like fresh blood from an open wound. It now lurked in the places where adults deny their deepest fears, in the bathroom mirror during a heated argument with Marta about unpaid bills, his reflection superimposed with a red smile that stretched as she yelled, on the fogged-up windshield of his car during endless gridlock, the clown inflating a clock-shaped balloon that ticked off lost hours, on the phone during failed work calls, its voice coming out of the speaker as a distorted laugh that drowned out the boss's excuses. Javier tried to exorcise it that same week, burning the old copy of It in a makeshift bonfire in the backyard, the pages catching fire with a crackle that smelled of ink and broken promises. But the flames only cast dancing shadows on the wood fence, the clown laughing among the charred pages, its orange eyes now gray like Javier's suit, dancing a slow waltz with the ashes. In the end, on a night of deep insomnia, where the drain dripped like a metronome of madness, Javier looked at his reflection in the steamed-up kitchen window, the neighborhood asleep under a waning moon. There it was again, superimposed over his exhausted face, Javier with cracked red makeup, smiling with teeth that weren't his while his own hands gloved in invisible white closed around his throat, squeezing with a force he couldn't resist. It wasn't just him, the one from Derry. The thing murmured, its voice now Javier's, hoarse and treacherous. There were many of us, preying on the fears you deny. And you're the next host, the clown who laughs inside his own skin. Javier's scream choked into a laugh that wasn't his, an eternal dance in the drain of his fractured soul, while Marta slept upstairs, unaware of the new show beginning in the house they shared. Rudy saw the clown hitchhiking at mile marker 113 on Interstate 13, a desolate stretch of cracked asphalt that snaked like a scar through the Nevada desert. The clown had his thumb out in an immaculate white glove, his head tilted in a silent, unsettling question. His bright red suit looking like fresh blood under the low orange moon hanging in the starry sky. Trucker reports have been filling the CB radios that October. Saw the son of a bitch again, boys. Blew right past him, but in the rear view, he was still smiling at me like he knew my route. But Rudy, a road veteran with asphalt scars on his gnarled hands and a thermos of black coffee always within reach, grumbled to himself, "Get in, damn it, it's freezing out here." The clown climbed into the passenger seat with an impossible lightness for his bulky frame. The semi roared back to life as Rudy hit the gas, the diesel engine vibrating like a mechanical heart. He weighed nothing, or so it seemed. The seat barely dipped, and a smell invaded the cab. Burnt engine oil mixed with stale popcorn and an underlying sweetness, like caramel melting on a slow fire. Rudy shot a sidelong glance, the dashboard light illuminating the clown's cracked makeup, painted eyes that didn't blink, fixed on the black horizon where the road disappeared into nothing. The silence stretched like tight rubber, broken only by the whine of the tires on the uneven pavement. Rudy flipped on the CB radio to break it, tuning into a static-filled channel where ghostly trucker voices whispered warnings. "Don't stop at 113, man, or you become the next joke." But the radio only spat out static with muffled giggles interspersed, like children laughing behind a closed door. "Where you headed, pal? Some circus in the middle of nowhere?" Rudy asked, forcing a hoarse laugh to loosen the knot in his stomach, his fingers gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. The clown didn't answer at first. He just pulled a handful of rubber balls from the infinite pocket of his button jacket, bouncing them on the dashboard with a hypnotic rhythm. Plop, 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 that synchronized with the pulse of the warning lights on the dash. Rudy felt a subtle dizziness, as if the road were curving into an invisible spiral. One ball got away, rolling under the seat, and when Rudy bent down to retrieve it, the next one smacked against the windshield with a dull pop, staining the glass with red paint that slid slowly like bloody tears, forming blurry words. "Drive with me." Rudy slammed the brakes hard, the semi skidding in a cloud of dust and gravel, his heart pounding like a broken piston. But the clown already had his white-gloved hand on the wheel, firm and inexorable, turning with a smile that stretched to his pointed ears. "Thanks for the lift, Rudy," he clucked, his voice a rattle of rusty tears and choked laughter. "Now I drive, and you're the eternal passenger." The desert stretched out endlessly under the indifferent moon, sand whispering secrets to the wind as the semi accelerated again, headlights cutting the darkness like knives. Other truckers' rigs showed up at dawn, abandoned on lonely shoulders, engines still warm, cabs intact but empty, the passenger seats splattered with crushed colored balls like busted eyes under heavy boots. Rudy's lay overturned in a deep ditch, the cab twisted like a broken toy, but inside only a note scribbled on wrinkled circus paper, fresh red ink. "Next stop, you, brother. Smile for the camera." The other truckers, hearing the news over the CB that morning, turned off their cab lights and prayed in hoarse whispers. crosses dangling from rearview mirrors as they peered at the roadside. But in every side mirror, the red thumb was already sticking out again, smiling with teeth that gleamed in the rising light. Interstate 13 doesn't forgive those who stop, and the clown always needs a new driver for his endless route. Bubbles the clown didn't leave after Mateo's party. As the last balloons deflated in the yard and the parents picked up cardboard plates splattered with frosting, he was still standing right by the kitchen door, his red smile stretched like a fresh cut. "Can I stay for dinner? Traffic is just terrible tonight in October." He said it in a voice that sounded like balloons going flat, painted eyes locked on the half-eaten cake. Laura, Mateo's mom, laughed at first, thinking it was part of the act, handing him the crumbled payment envelope as the 15 shrieking kids streamed out, leaving a trail of confetti and crumbs. Everything had been perfect that afternoon. The controlled chaos whirlwind in the backyard, the piñata hanging like a bloody pineapple ready to burst, and Bubbles juggling beach balls that glowed in the setting sun, painting faces with stars and crooked mustaches while singing a final song that left the kids exhausted and happy, rolling in the damp grass. "Thanks, Bubbles. You were a hit," Laura said, adjusting the strap of her stained apron. But he just tilted his head, pom-poms jingling, and sat down at the kitchen table while she did the dishes, telling anecdotes about faraway circuses, elephants that never forgot, trapeze artists who fell but never hit the ground, his eyes fixed on Mateo, who was playing alone in the living room with a balloon tied to his wrist, his laughter a solitary echo. The next day, Laura found him at the breakfast table, pouring himself cereal from the open box with a spoon that wasn't theirs, the morning sun filtering through the curtains and casting his long shadow on the scratched linoleum. "You scared me. How did you get in last night?" she exclaimed, dropping her coffee cup, which shattered into white pieces. "The door was open, ma'am. Just came to check on the birthday boy and finish that cake." He blinked innocently, his red nose inflating slightly as if breathing in the sugar smell. Mateo walked in then, rubbing his sleepy eyes, and hugged him, laughing, tugging on Bubbles' jacket like he was an old school friend. Laura, tired from sleepless nights and mounting bills, sighed and let it go, serving him an extra bowl of cereal. That night, as Laura folded laundry on the couch, with the TV murmuring a cop show, she heard giggling from Mateo's room. Bubbles was in there, perched on the edge of the bed, with the sheets rumbled, telling stories about shadows dancing in tattered tents, balloons floating untethered around the nightstand lamp. "He's harmless, just an eccentric clown," Laura told herself, ignoring the soft click of the front door locking itself as if the house was letting out a held breath. By the third day, Bubbles was everywhere, a sticky presence that seeped into the cracks of their routine. Brushing his teeth in the bathroom mirror next to her at dawn, his reflection superimposed over Laura's with a smile that made the steamy fog look thicker. Crouched in the back seat of the car when she took Mateo to school, inflating a school bus-shaped balloon that bounced against the ceiling. Posing behind the family in spontaneous phone pictures, like a forgotten uncle nobody invited, but who always shows up to gatherings. Laura called the entertainment agency that afternoon, her voice shaky into the receiver while Bubbles played cards with Mateo on the living room floor. "We don't have any Bubbles in our records, ma'am. Are you sure he wasn't a neighbor in costume?" they told her, and the phone felt heavy in her hand. She tried to kick him out that night, shouting at the front door with autumn rain whipping the windows, "Leave, this isn't your home." But he just laughed, soft as melting cotton candy, extending a gloved hand. "The party doesn't end, ma'am. It only begins, and Mateo needs me for the midnight tricks." A week later, the house was wrapped in an oppressive silence, broken only by choked laughter rising from the basement. Mateo smiled in his room, his face painted permanently red, eyes glazed over as if he were sleepwalking. Laura looked out the window that night, fog wrapping the yard, and saw Bubbles outside, inflating a balloon shaped like a perfect family. Father, mother, child, all with stitched up smiles. But the balloon didn't float in the breeze. It sank slowly into the damp earth, heavy like a buried secret. The party invitation had been accepted forever, and now the clown was the host of their home. No one remembered his name, not even in whispers. They just called him the clown, a whisper that evaporated into the air like smoke from a snuffed-out cigarette, leaving only a chill on the back of your neck. He showed up on the thresholds of the mundane and the fragile, in a hospital hallway at midnight, laughing silently next to machines that beeped like muffled mechanical laughs, his white gloves brushing against curtains that swayed without wind. On a school playground during recess, swinging on an empty swing while the kids watched him, hypnotized, their games stopping one by one as if an invisible hand flipped a switch. At the edge of a funeral, under a leaden October sky, inflating black balloons that floated slowly like lost souls, tied to headstones with invisible string. Dr. Elena Vargas saw him for the first time in the Central Hospital's ICU, watching over her terminal patient, an old man with tubes snaking through his wrinkled skin under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps. He was there, at the foot of the bed, white gloves stained with something sticky and reddish that dripped onto the sterile linoleum, his mouth an unmoving red curve that emitted an echo of soundless cackles, reverberating on the white walls like an underground pulse. Elena blinked, adjusting her glasses fogged by fatigue, and asked the nurse passing by with a tray of syringes, "Ma'am, do you need anything? Did you see that clown?" The nurse frowned, looking at the empty space. "There's no one here, doctor. Just you and Mr. Lopez." And he vanished like smoke from a blown-out candle, leaving only a sweet smell of stale cotton candy. Elena blamed accumulated exhaustion, double shifts, cold coffee, the weight of inevitable diagnoses. But when checking the security cameras that same morning in the poorly ventilated control room, there he was, a blurred silhouette superimposed on every frame like a glitch in reality, laughing without sound as the patient's monitor flatlined in a final beat. Curious and disturbed, she investigated the yellowed files in the municipal library, dust motes pantsing in the beams of her flashlight as she flipped through microfilmed newspapers. A teacher in the 50s who forgot her own name after staring at him during recess. A priest in the 70s who only remembered praying with a stitched-up smile on his lips red thread pulled tight. Fragmented testimonies, like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to put together. Elena deliberately sought him out then, armed with a notepad and a determination bordering on obsession. Visiting empty schools at dusk, hallways echoing with the sounds of distant bells. Hospitals at nightfall, where the smell of disinfectant mixed with something sweeter, more rotten. She found him in an outlying cemetery, sitting on a mossy headstone under a moon bleeding orange, telling jokes to the shadows that stretched between the crooked crosses. Jokes about eternal falls, laughter that never stops. She approached with measured steps, her heart hammering in her ears like a circus drum. "Who are you? What do you want?" she demanded, her voice firm despite the trembling in her knees. He turned his head with deliberate slowness, eyes like sewn-on black buttons that absorbed the light, and stared at her, his smile stretching until the white makeup cracked. At first, it was a slight forgetting, like a word on the tip of her tongue. Her mother's name, the bitter taste of morning coffee, her husband's face in the wallet photo. Elena shook her head, walking quickly toward her parked car, but the cemetery seemed bigger now, paths curving into foggy labyrinths. She raced home that night, barricading herself in her minimalist apartment with candles lit against the darkness. But in the hallway mirror, her reflection smiled with stitched lips, red thread pulled tight against pale skin, tugging the corners until it hurt. She screamed, scratching the glass until she bled, but only silent laughter came out, an echo that vibrated in her bones. The next day, her colleagues found her in the ICU waiting room, inflating balloons for sick children with hands that didn't tremble, laughing silently while painting stars on their cheeks. "Dr. Vargas, are you okay?" they asked, but she only smiled, her eyes empty. No one remembered her name anymore. They just called her the clown. And she smiled, forever stitched into the endless show, telling jokes no one wanted to hear, but couldn't forget. In the mirror tunnel at the Kroll Brothers Traveling Carnival, a maze of polished panels that multiplied chaos into endless echoes, Carla saw the clown in a side panel, not her own reflection, distorted into grotesque fatness or skinniness, but a real alien one with a suit of black and white polka dots rippling like murky water, painted eyes fixed on her with an intensity that cut the thick air of past laughter. "Look at that! What the hell is that?" she whispered to her clumsy date, a local guy named Diego, with sweaty hands on her arm, but he was already lost a few feet ahead, nervously laughing at his own dwarf, bald reflection, oblivious to the horror unfolding. The carnival was a vortex of blinking lights and greasy fryer smells that October night, a temporary balm for forgotten towns where winter lurked like a patient predator. Carla, 22, with freckles sprinkled on her nose and hair messed up by the Midwest breeze, had gone in on an impulse date. "Come in with me, you'll see how crazy it is, like a movie house of mirrors." Inside, the air was thick and heavy, echoes of old cackles bouncing off the walls like stray bullets, the mirrors multiplying her face into a sea of Carlas laughing, crying, silently screaming, fat versions with shaking cheeks, thin ones like ghosts, old ones with wrinkles like maps of future sorrows. But in that panel, the clown watched motionless, extending a gloved hand toward the glass, as if inviting her to a forbidden dance. his red nose subtly inflating with every breath Carla didn't hear but felt in her chest. Equally fascinated and terrified, she approached step by step, the wooden floor creaking under her worn sneakers, her heart beating a frantic rhythm. What happens if I touch it? Is it part of the show? She muttered to herself, her breath fogging the mirror. Her fingers brushed the cold glass, and it yielded like sticky, icy jelly, a portal that sucked her hand in with a wet, slurping sound. The clown then stepped out, his form solidifying in the stale air, the touch an electric shiver that ran down her spine like live current, fragmenting the world into infinite reflections that spun like a broken kaleidoscope. She screamed, the sound bouncing off 1,000 mirrored throats, but Diego didn't come. His footsteps were lost down another corridor, his laughter turning into a distant echo. The clown circled her, his glove grazing her shoulder, and the tunnel became a living labyrinth, mirrors cracking into patterns of red smiles, versions of Carla multiplying with makeup spreading like an infection. She stumbled out into the carnival night, the fresh air hitting her like a slap. But the clown was no longer confined. Now he walks free among the mirrors of the real world, reflecting in fogged-up car windows stopped at red lights, his red nose leaving marks like bloody kisses, lurking behind innocent selfies on phone screens that blink in the darkness of shared rooms, multiplying in the dilated pupils of strangers who stared too long in the mirror, seeing not their face, but his, superimposed, smiling with gleaming teeth. Carla still looks for him on every polished surface of her daily life, her car's rearview mirror at dawn, the glass of the coffee maker in the shared kitchen, Diego's eyes when he finally found her outside, pale and stammering. But she no longer knows which is her own true reflection. She touches one at random in the quiet of midnight, and sometimes it's her who steps out from the other side with cracked red makeup and an incessant laugh she can't contain, the clown laughing through her skin. The carnival keeps moving, setting up in new towns under starry skies, but the mirror tunnel is now infinite, an open portal reflecting horrors in every stolen glance. In 1993, during a late-night rehearsal in Ridgewood High's condemned auditorium, drama teacher Hargrove disappeared with 3 of his best students. The stage was left empty under dusty lights that hummed like trapped flies, tattered curtains hanging still, and a single red balloon floating in the center, tied to nothing, swaying as if an invisible breeze rocked it. Hargrove was a legend in the yellowing halls of the 90s, tall and lanky with thick-rimmed glasses. He wore a ragged clown costume for physical expression classes, yelling, "Feel the laugh in your bones, kids. Let it out or it'll rot inside," while painting red and white faces with thick brushes, running improv drills that left the teenagers exhausted from forced cackles and tears of exertion. The police swept the place that October night, flashlights cutting the darkness like knives, but they only found discarded white gloves in the orchestra pit, stained with something sticky they couldn't identify. Rumors spread like fog. The clown took them, students whispered at the rusty lockers, but the adults filed it away as a teenage runaway case, an unsolved mystery that faded with Nirvana cassettes and grunge fashion. Today in 2025, with hallways upgraded with tablets and security cameras, new students whisper the same thing in group chats. The clown still rehearses there in the old auditorium. Don't go alone. Emma, the 17-year-old drama club president with ambition that burned like stage lights, didn't believe in ghosts or urban legends. She was pragmatic with a podcast in mind for her college application. She organized a late-night break-in this Halloween with 3 friends, Tim the Joker, Lena the Skeptic, and Marco the quiet tech guy. Flashlights in hoodie pockets, the auditorium lock clipped with borrowed bolt cutters. Dust motes danced in the beams of light as they pushed open the rusty door, which creaked like a held breath, and the air hit them with the stench of mold and old paint, echoes of phantom applause bouncing off the high rafters. The tattered curtain hung like loose skin from a gutted animal, and in the center of the splintered stage, they saw him, Hargrove, or what was left of him after 3 decades, his costume intact but stiff as time-hardened cardboard, conducting an invisible play with broad mechanical gestures. The actors were 3 motionless shadows around him, thin figures with painted faces that didn't breathe, waxy skin beneath the makeup, repeating lines in an eternal monotone loop. Laugh with me or die alone, like a script recorded on scratched vinyl. Welcome to the cast. Take your places. Hargrove clucked, his voice a distorted echo of old magnetic tape leaking from cracked lips that didn't move. Emma laughed nervously at first, raising her phone to record. This is gold, guys, a perfect prank. But Tim froze when the shadows turned toward them in synchronized motion, stitched open eyes glowing a ghostly white. Lena backed away, tripping over a loose cable that sparked, and Marco muttered, "That's not a hologram. Look at their shadows. They don't cast one." The rehearsal started mercilessly. Hargrove handed out makeup from a dusty box that appeared from nowhere, brushes wet with paint that smelled like iron and rotten sweetness. Whoever it touched joined the cast instantly, laughing uncontrollably in guttural cackles that echoed in the walls, their bodies rigid like puppets with invisible strings pulling their limbs. Tim was the first, his face transforming into a red mask as he babbled alien lines. Lena screamed when one shadow's glove grazed her arm, her laughter bubbling up like vomit. Marco ran for the exit, but the curtain closed itself with a heavy swoosh, trapping Emma on the stage where the lights flickered red, multiplying her shadow. Emma fought, clawing at the curtain until her nails splintered, but the clown approached, whispering, "The play needs a lead," and the makeup spread across her skin like living ink. The play always ends the same way, a collective cackle that booms off the auditorium walls, not ceasing until dawn when the birds sing outside, unaware. The next day, the drama club announces a new stellar production, The Eternal Rehearsal, featuring 4 main actors who don't blink or sweat under the spotlights, their smiles fixed in eternal red. No one asks about Emma or her friends. You only hear the laughter seeping through the cracks of the building, rehearsing for the next night, the curtain rising once more in the darkness. The box arrived in an anonymous delivery the day after Grandpa Arturo's funeral. wrapped in crumpled brown paper that smelled of mothballs and wet dirt. Splintered wood with rusty hinges that squeaked when opened, revealing the antique clown suit, a relic from the Great Depression when Arturo performed in dusty traveling circuses, making hungry families laugh for pennies in tattered tickets. Use it carefully, read the attached note in handwriting shaky as branches in the wind. It brings happiness, but don't give it back, or it stays forever. The Lopez family stashed it in the dusty attic at first, among forgotten Christmas boxes and faded photos. But curiosity was an insidious virus that spread during family dinners under dim lights. The first generation to try it on was Aunt Rosa at a 40s party in a rented hall with deflated balloons and sour beer. She wore it as a joke, the suit hanging loose but alive, and happiness washed over her like a tide. Contagious laughter that filled the room, jokes pouring from her painted lips like spilled wine. But also violence, a punch thrown to a neighbor for an innocuous comment, a smile that wouldn't disappear even during furious arguments, stretching tight until it hurt. She died young in a state asylum, forcibly sewn into a straitjacket, laughing until her heart gave out, the suit found folded in her cell, as if waiting for the next one. Daniel's turn came on Halloween, at 28, alone in the inherited grandpa's house, a Victorian mansion with high ceilings and echoes in the empty hallways, rain whipping the windows like impatient applause. The attic smelled of old wood and secrets, and Daniel pulled out the box with curious hands, the suit unfolding like shed skin. Jacket with pom-poms that jingled softly, baggy pants that whispered promises as they brushed the floor. It fit him perfectly, as if it had shrunk over the years to adjust to him, and he looked at himself in the dusty attic mirror, wiping a circle clean with his sleeve. Happiness flooded him then, a warm, euphoric wave, laughter bubbling up like champagne, making his chest vibrate. He went downstairs onto the street that night, the neighborhood lit by flickering jack-o'-lanterns, telling jokes to passing strangers in makeshift costumes like, "Why don't ghosts lie? Because they're transparent." And the world looked like a glorious circus, streetlights spinning like spotlight beams. He returned at dawn, exhausted but radiant, collapsing into bed with the suit still on. The next day, the smile didn't leave. Daniel felt it tight on his face when he woke, muscles locked in a permanent curve that wouldn't yield even when he frowned in the bathroom mirror, just a red painted grimace from the inside, as if the makeup had seeped into his blood. The violence came subtly at first, a shove to his girlfriend during a forced laugh at dinner, his hand clenching into a fist without permission. A shout that came out like a cheerful caw when his boss scolded him for a late report, the office freezing into silence. He cried that night in the shower, hot water rolling down cheeks that wouldn't crumple into grooves of sorrow, and yet he smiled, teeth exposed in a grimace that hurt down to the bone. Grandpa had warned in yellowed letters Daniel found later. Inherited happiness is a noose that tightens slow until you laugh as the world burns. Now, Daniel walks through the gray city in November, telling jokes no one wants to hear in empty parks and crowded cafes, his face a living mask that draws glances of pity and fear. The box waits in the attic, dusty but ready, the suit folded like a promise for the next generation, maybe his niece, maybe a curious cousin. He smiles because he can't stop, his lips trembling under the invisible pole, Not even when the red thread begins to stitch them from the inside, one loop at a time, ensuring the inherited laughter never dies. October 13th always dawns gray and heavy in some forgotten Midwest town. The veil of low clouds that smothers church bells and tints the streets with a cold, metallic sheen. At St. Lawrence Elementary, a red brick building with tall windows like squinting eyes, a clown appears at noon in front of the rusty fence, motionless as a circus statue, white suit stained with autumn mud and dead leaves, red nose faded like an old wound that never heals. He never enters, never speaks. He just watches, sunken eyes scrutinizing the classrooms through the wire mesh like a patient predator measuring prey in a corral. Mrs. Lopez, a teacher in her 50s with fogged-up glasses and a thermos of tea always in hand, noticed the silence first that morning. No kids were laughing during recess. The cracked cement playground, usually a chaos of squealing swings, balls bouncing against chains, and silly jokes about farts and teachers. Instead, a heavy quiet, as if the air had thickened with something invisible. The little ones clustered in nervous groups, eyes darting toward the fence where the clown stood, a black balloon tied to his wrist, dragging on the ground like a reluctant shadow. "It's the one outside," murmured a 6-year-old student named Pablo, pale as melted wax, tugging at Lopez's skirt. "He keeps the laughter in his pocket, teacher. I heard it last night in my dreams." Lopez looked out the classroom window, fine rain starting to splatter the glass like held-back tears. And there he was, the clown in the incipient downpour, water running in rivulets down his cracked makeup, outlining white and red grooves that looked like exposed veins. Parents ignored him while picking up their children that afternoon, umbrellas deployed like shields, muttering, "It's some Halloween nut, that's all, with this cold weather," as they signed report cards and adjusted scarves. But the children knew the truth. Their cold little hands intertwined, whispering about the one who chooses one every year, the one who makes the balloons pop. At nightfall, as the sun sank like a counterfeit coin behind gray buildings, every balloon in the neighborhood burst in unison, dry, synchronized pops that echoed like distant gunfire in the stillness, filling the air with a pungent stench of burnt rubber and torn latex, colored pieces floating in puddles like confetti from a failed party. Mothers blamed the fickle wind whipping the bare branches. Fathers, rebellious teenagers setting off firecrackers in garages. But the children watched from the fogged-up windows, the clown choosing a small silhouette among the school recess crowd, an invisible wink marking Pablo, or the girl with braids, whose laughter would die that night in a choked whisper, replaced by a silence that hurt in the chest. The next day, the town of Eldridge would wake up in a false calm, the clown moving with the wind to another fence, another elementary school in a neighboring town, fresh eyes to scrutinize. The chosen one wouldn't come home, only their echo would remain, a choked cackle seeping through drains and cracks, a reminder that the 13th brings visitors. The adults would say, "It disappeared with the wind, poor thing," serving hot dinners and turning on TVs to drown out the silence. The children would count the days on scribbled calendars, crossing off until the next 13th, knowing that the circus of watching never closes its canvas. It just waits, patient, for the laughter it will steal next.
In the mirror tunnel at the Crow Brothers Traveling Carnival, a maze of polished panels that multiplied chaos into endless echoes, Carla saw the clown in a side panel, not her own reflection distorted into grotesque fatness or skinniness, but a real alien one, with a suit of black and white polka dots rippling like murky water, painted eyes fixed on her with an intensity that cut the thick air of past laughter. "Look at that! What the hell is that?" she whispered to her clumsy date, a local guy named Diego, with sweaty hands on her arm, but he was already lost a few feet ahead, nervously laughing at his own dwarf, bald reflection, oblivious to the horror unfolding. The carnival was a vortex of blinking lights and greasy fryer smells that October night, a temporary balm for forgotten towns where winter lurked like a patient predator. Carla, 22, with freckles sprinkled on her nose and hair messed up by the Midwest breeze, had gone in on an impulse date. "Come in with me. You'll see how crazy it is, like a movie house of mirrors." Inside, the air was thick and heavy, echoes of old cackles bouncing off the walls like stray bullets, the mirrors multiplying her face into a sea of Carla's laughing, crying, silently screaming, fat versions with shaking cheeks, thin ones like ghosts, old ones with wrinkles like maps of future sorrows. But in that panel, the clown watched motionless, extending a gloved hand toward the glass, as if inviting her to a forbidden dance, his red nose subtly inflating with every breath Carla didn't hear but felt in her chest. Equally fascinated and terrified, she approached step by step, the wooden floor creaking under her worn sneakers, her heart beating a frantic rhythm. "What happens if I touch it? Is it part of the show?" she muttered to herself, her breath fogging the mirror. Her fingers brushed the cold glass, and it yielded like sticky, icy jelly, a portal that sucked her hand in with a wet, slurping sound. The clown then stepped out, his form solidifying in the stale air, the touch an electric shiver that ran down her spine like live current, fragmenting the world into infinite reflections that spun like a broken kaleidoscope. She screamed, the sound bouncing off 1,000 mirrored throats, but Diego didn't come. His footsteps were lost down another corridor, his laughter turning into a distant echo. The clown circled her, his glove grazing her shoulder, and the tunnel became a living labyrinth, mirrors cracking into patterns of red smiles, versions of Carla multiplying with makeup spreading like an infection. She stumbled out into the carnival night, the fresh air hitting her like a slap. But the clown was no longer confined. Now he walks free among the mirrors of the real world, reflecting in fogged-up car windows stopped at red lights, his red nose leaving marks like bloody kisses, lurking behind innocent selfies on phone screens that blink in the darkness of shared rooms, multiplying in the dilated pupils of strangers who stare too long in the mirror, seeing not their face, but his, superimposed, smiling with gleaming teeth. Carla still looks for him on every polished surface of her daily life, her car's rear-view mirror at dawn, the glass of the coffee maker in the shared kitchen, Diego's eyes when he finally found her outside, pale and stammering. But she no longer knows which is her own true reflection. She touches one at random in the quiet of midnight, and sometimes it's her who steps out from the other side with cracked red makeup and an incessant laugh she can't contain, the clown laughing through her skin. The carnival keeps moving, setting up in new towns under starry skies, but the mirror tunnel is now infinite, an open portal reflecting horrors in every stolen glance.